Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to talk about the WBC, problems and solutions. I hinted at doing this topic at the end of my last video, and it was suggested by a few of you out there. I do appreciate all the suggestions. Keep them coming, and I'll try to get around to doing them all. And I'd like to say thank you to all 500 subscribers out there. My goal was 500 by the new year, and we've reached it with plenty of time to spare. Next up is 1,000 by the All-Star break. Before I get to the 5 problems with the WBC that I want to point out today, first I want to mention a few things I will not be talking about. One is the time of year when this event takes place. It is a problem, but one with no possible solution. There is no perfect time of year for the event. Before the season, in March, is the best choice. It comes 4 months after the end of the World Series, so people are ready to watch some baseball again. If you move it to November, which some people have called for, it would have to follow the World Series, which is a hard, if not impossible, act to follow. Another thing I won't be critical of is the format for the main tournament. The problem is that anything can happen in a single game of baseball, so it would be best played in a series. However, unless you want to start this event in the middle of winter, or reduce the number of teams to 4, then you'll have to make do with an imperfect format. Besides, the current setup is a big improvement from the WBC's first 2 editions. Now, here are some problems we might be able to fix. First up, qualifying. The top 12 teams in the WBC automatically qualify for the next one, 4 years later. A lot can change in 4 years. Think about MLB 2015 versus 2019. Ronald Acuna Jr. and Juan Soto went from teenagers to MLB stars. Jake Arrieta went from Cy Young winner to mediocrity. David Ortiz, Adrian Beltre, and several others retired. Why is this bad for the WBC? Well, you have dozens of countries trying to get into the qualifying round, and out of the 16 that get invited, only 4 spots are up for grabs. Looking at the 4 teams from last WBC that will have to play in next year's qualifying round, you have Canada, Mexico, Chinese Taipei, and China. If you're in a country with an up-and-coming baseball program, this won't give you much hope. 3 of those countries are well known for producing baseball talent, so really you've got 12 teams trying to beat China. If you have every country qualify, or at least most of them, there are more spots up for grabs, and more countries that are not baseball powerhouses that have to defend their place in the tournament. Bottom line is, if countries feel like they have a better chance of making the tournament, they'll get more excited about the qualifying round. But right now, they're not too excited about it. Next up, non-native players. Since the very first WBC, Italy has fielded a team made up almost entirely of Americans of Italian descent. They don't need to. A real Italian played in MLB not long ago. Several more play in the minors. The country has its own professional league. Israel is another one. With no actual Israelis on the roster, their win over South Korea in the last WBC was meaningless. The rules on eligibility state that someone can play for a country if just one of his parents was born there or holds citizenship. This opens the door for many American players to represent a country they've likely never even been to. Why is this bad? First of all, it does nothing to promote interest in baseball in those countries. Think about it. What if FIFA decided that anyone who has an ancestor that emigrated to America can play soccer for Team USA? Then a team full of Europeans and South Americans wins the World Cup. Would that get more Americans into soccer? Or would it be mocked and ridiculed? The latter, of course. And to an observer from outside of the sport, this looks like a pathetic attempt to make baseball look like an international sport when it really isn't. But we all know it is an international sport. Italy can field a decent team with real Italian players, and when they win in the WBC with those players, it'll actually mean something, and it will probably spark more interest in baseball. As for Israel, they shouldn't be in the WBC. It's a shame that Israel was in the tournament, while a country like Panama that has real homegrown talent and actually cares about baseball was not. Locations. I'm not talking about how they have different groups play in different countries. I actually like that system. It gives more countries a chance to see part of the WBC. What I'm talking about is their refusal to break out of their comfort zone. If they want to spread this event to the world, they can start by giving a piece of it to other parts of the world. In the last WBC, Pool 4 consisted of Brazil, Israel, the UK, and Pakistan. So where did they play? New York City. They didn't want to play in one of those countries and have low attendance figures, so they had them play in New York where there are immigrants from all countries of the world. And it didn't work. Average attendance for that venue was under 2,000. If any Brazilians, Israelis, Brits, or Pakistanis living in New York have any interest in baseball, they're more likely to check out a Yankees or Mets game, rather than a WBC qualifier. Those games should have been played in one of those countries. Attendance for the qualifier is going to be low anyway. You might as well have it in a place where you can attract new fans. And then there's the championship round. Not only is it played in the same country, it's played in the same state every single time. California is the ultimate safe choice, given the population of Latinos and East Asians there. Again, an outside observer could look at this and say that the WBC is not an international event. It relies on Korean Americans, Mexican Americans, Japanese Americans, etc. to fill up the seats as well as the rosters, when it's really not necessary. They could sell out a stadium elsewhere. The best place to try holding the championship round would be at Tokyo Dome. I've heard people argue that Tokyo Dome will only sell out if Japan is playing. I point to the recent Rugby World Cup. Japan was eliminated in the quarterfinals, but for the rest of the tournament you could see Japanese fans throughout the stadium rooting for the countries that were still playing. True, the WBC won't attract as many overseas fans as the Rugby World Cup does, but Tokyo Dome is easier to sell out. It's a smaller venue, and it's in a country where baseball is the top sport. People may point to the earlier rounds of past WBCs Tokyo has hosted, and point out that the games not involving Japan didn't do so well. Of course, when you have Australia versus China in the early rounds of the tournament, you're not going to get more than a few thousand fans, no matter where it's played. But when you have a matchup like USA versus Puerto Rico playing for it all, people will show up. The last two problems I'll talk about are primarily American problems, but that doesn't make them any less important. USA is the birthplace of baseball, and the home of the top professional baseball league. The event can still succeed regardless of what happens in America. But if the WBC can get the support from fans and players in the US that it really deserves, it will help the event grow worldwide. One of these problems is getting the best players on the field. Since the WBC began, every country has dealt with this in some way or another. But it seems like every time you could build a better USA baseball team out of the players in spring training than the ones participating in the WBC. Some might argue that this is a good thing because it means more parity. That doesn't matter. Look at Olympic basketball. The USA team dominates every time, but it doesn't bother basketball fans around the world. They flock to the arenas and watch on TV to see the best basketball players in the world. Besides, baseball has a lot more parity than basketball. USA, with all its best players, and Dominican Republic with its best, is a pretty good matchup. And I concede that we'll probably never get the best pitchers out there. Expecting a pitcher to suddenly start throwing hard after a few months' rest is a lot to ask. The stress they put on their arms is unique to baseball. We'll just have to accept that. But it would be great if we could at least have the best position players on the field. And if we had that, it might take care of the last problem, TV coverage. Again, this is mostly an American problem. In several other countries, the WBC is televised on major networks. If there's enough demand from baseball fans to watch the WBC, it will get picked up by one of the networks. I don't expect it to surpass March Madness in viewership anytime soon. But there are enough baseball fans in America to drive the demand to the point where it gets a better TV deal. And that will happen when they feel they have a good reason to watch. That will only happen when MLB's best players are on the field. And that's all for today. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are there any other problems with the WBC that I didn't mention here? Do you have a different solution to the problems I did mention? Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.